Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to what really matters, taking loads of info and pulling out the key stuff so you don't have to. Today, we're getting into a really compelling story. It's about how, a small kind of underground thing born in a very specific niche can face huge challenges and still somehow blossom into this global success. Yeah, we're talking about the journey of Kush House. We'll trace it from like a record label starting in the San Fernando Valley all the way to where it is now a thriving social lounge over in Barcelona, Spain. We'll pull our insights today from some excerpts called Kush House, From Valley Studio to Barcelona Lounge, presented by Nug Notes. And our mission for you, listening in, is to unpack this story of resilience, culture, vision, and figure out what lessons we can take away about bouncing back from setbacks and keeping your core identity even when things change completely.
It's a fantastic narrative. It really shows how far a powerful vision can take you, even when things get really tough. What I find fascinating is how that core essence, that specific cultural niche, the authenticity it turned out to be, well, a stronger foundation than just location or even a single business model. Their vision wasn't just make music. It was more like be the real voice of this community. And that vision proved incredibly adaptable.
That's a great way to put it. So let's dive into that origin story. The source makes it sound like Kush House Records started out, pretty humble. Can you kind of paint a picture of those early days? We're talking San Fernando Valley back in 2008. And who were the key players?
Absolutely. Okay, picture this. Summer 2008, Woodland Hills, SFE. Kush House Records wasn't some fancy office. It literally started in the back room of a dispensary called HC Remedies. The founders, they were a tight group. You had twin brothers, George and Lou, plus Big Hallisey, Dr. K, who, interesting side note, later founded Kush Stock and Bubba Nasty. And the crucial thing to get about them right from the start was their mission. It was super clear, very authentic. They weren't just trying to make it in rap. They wanted their music to be about their actual lives. And back then, in that part of SoCal, that meant hip hop and cannabis right alongside each other. It wasn't just making tracks. It was about voicing a lifestyle, this growing subculture. They were merging two powerful things that were really taking off together. That realness, that was their bedrock.
Right, I can imagine. So the ambition was there, but the source calls those early days raw. Started in a garage studio, just a few local artists. What does that tell us? About their early commitment, maybe, and how fast did they move from that raw energy to something more structured, especially with upgrading the studio in 2009?
Yeah, that raw stage, the garage setup, it really speaks volumes about their drive, Pure grassroots stuff. It shows pure passion, a lean operation. But importantly, they saw pretty quickly they needed something more professional. So by 2009, they'd already stepped up to a fully equipped Kush House studio. And that early investment, it wasn't just about sounding better. It showed they were in it for the long haul. It proved they believed in what they were doing artistically and were serious about building a real platform, nurturing their sound, their artists, moving from the garage to a proper studio. That was a huge early step in carving out their professional identity in that underground scene.
Okay, and that dedication, like you said, it started getting noticed, at least within their niche. Those early projects, Kush House Volumes 1, 2, and 3, they didn't just get out there, they stamped their name in the underground. For anyone building a brand from zero, how important are those first wins, especially in an underground scene like that?
Oh, they're absolutely vital, especially in a subculture. Stamping their name, that meant way more than just selling some mixtapes. It was about building credibility, establishing who they were. It basically proved their concept work, that this blend of hip-hop and cannabis culture, done authentically, really hit home with an audience. Those early volumes, they built a loyal base, created real brand recognition within that specific scene they were aiming for. It showed they weren't just playing around. They were defining a sound, a lifestyle. And that early buzz, that word of mouth, it's priceless when you're trying to build a whole movement from the ground up. Position them as pioneers.
Now, the early 2010s, that brought a pretty big shift in the cannabis world, right? The source mentions the BHO wave around 2011. Can you break that down? What was it and how did it affect the scene Kush House was in, especially leading up to that cult anthem, Dab City?
Right, that's a key moment. And it shows perfectly how Kush House could not just see these shifts coming, but actually ride them, even help define them. So the BHO wave, that's about butane hash oil. A really potent cannabis extract that took off around 2011. It wasn't just a new product. It kind of sparked its own subculture. New rituals, new slang, a whole community within the bigger cannabis world. And Kush House, they weren't just watching this happen. They jumped right into the middle of what the source calls extracts rap culture.
Mhm.
Their track, Dab City, it wasn't just about dabbing. It like perfectly captured the whole vibe of this new scene. And boom, it became a cult anthem. That really cemented their place, not just as a record label, but as the voice for this specific fast-changing niche. It's a great example of how art, when it really clicks with a cultural moment, can both reflect it and shape it. It gave the brand this distinct, memorable identity, super relevant, and it created this bond with their audience. You know, it went beyond just music. People felt seen, represented.
But success, as they say, it's rarely a straight line. 2021 brought a massive challenge, both personal and for the business. One of the co-founders, Lou, was arrested in Mexico, sentenced to 8 years. That's devastating. Hard to even imagine the impact. What does this tell us about how fragile these kinds of ventures can be, especially when they're so tied to the founders?
Yeah, the impact was, well, the source says it clearly, his absence hit hard, just profound. George, the other twin, his reaction was to shut down the studio. And for a while, Kush House kind of faded into memory. It really highlights the fragility, doesn't it? Especially for creative businesses like Kush House, so deeply connected to the founders' lives, their presence. It's a serious reminder that even with a strong vision, early success, a major personal blow to someone key can put the whole thing at risk. It really underscores why building resilient structures, maybe thinking about succession or spreading leadership roles, can be so important even early on. Just to guard against these awful, unforeseen personal hits, it really brings home the human element in any business.
Right. And interestingly, even before that huge setback, there was actually an earlier try at expanding the Kush House idea. Let's rewind a bit to 2019. Lou, along with Pete, that's Peter Mamakos and Kay from Honeycomb Extracts, they bought half of a social club in Barcelona. Sounds exciting, right? A bold move. But the source says it didn't quite work out as planned.
Yeah, on paper, it sounds like a great next step, go international. But the source is pretty blunt about why that first attempt failed. Quote, the partnership collapsed, the vision was there, the foundation wasn't. And that right there is a huge lesson for anyone starting a business. It shows that even if you have a brilliant idea, passionate people, an exciting market, if the partnership basics, the business structure, aren't solid, it can all fall apart. It really highlights things like clear ownership, making sure everyone's aligned on decisions, having solid legal stuff in place. Those aren't just boring details. They're crucial for lasting growth. They stop internal issues from sinking the whole ship. It just goes to show passion needs structure, or even the best ideas can fail.
Okay, so we've seen the highs, the really tough lows, and even a false start in a new country. Honestly, most people might have just called it quits then. But this is where that resilience really kicks in. Fast forward again to 2022. Despite everything studio closed, the personal tragedy, the Barcelona failure, George decides to try Barcelona again. And this time, he's back with Pete and Kay, but there's a new determination, a really clear one. They wanted to own the whole lounge, not half. What does that shift tell us? About learning from mistakes, maybe. Strengthening the foundation for the vision.
That shift is absolutely key. It shows they directly learned from that 2019 experience. Going from partial partnership to aiming for full ownership wasn't just about preference. It was recognizing that for stability, for growth, you need control. You need a unified vision. It showed they understood that to make it sustainable, they needed an independent single foundation for that vision. Practically, full ownership probably made decision-making way easier, removed potential conflicts, let George and the team really execute their plan without compromise. So that deeper commitment, a stronger business plan based on past failure, that was a massive step towards making it work long-term. It suggests they realized the how was just as vital as the what.
And it sounds like it worked. The source says they found the perfect spot right by the beach in Barcelona, from a garage in the valley to a beachside lounge in Spain. Kind of poetic, like you said. But even with the new place, what's really striking is George's commitment to the brand itself. Despite maybe other name ideas floating around, he insisted it had to be Kush House because of its history and weight. Why was keeping that original name so important, do you think?
Sticking with the original name. That's incredibly significant, a real lesson in branding. George clearly got that Kush House wasn't just a name. It carried all that history, the underground cred, the whole cultural movement they'd helped build. It stood for authenticity, a certain lifestyle, a community they'd built over years. That legacy gave them instant recognition, an identity, even in a brand new market. It showed that, okay, the location's different, the business model changed, but the core spirit, that was the same. And smartly, to make sure it felt fresh but still connected, they brought in graphic artist Gumsy for a bold new logo. Updated the look while respecting the history. It's about honoring that past, that earned weight, while building for the future. It let them tap into existing recognition within the cannabis world while also grabbing a new audience.
Right. So perfect spot, original name, fresh look. They had a plan. And it was actually pretty cautious at first. Their initial idea was really practical. Test the brand 6 months and see if it stuck. They weren't rushing in. Strategic, iterative.
Yeah, and what's amazing is how that careful plan just took off. The source puts it bluntly. It didn't just stick, it exploded.
Yeah.
That incredibly fast, enthusiastic reception is super significant. Why? Well, it suggests the Kush House brand just resonated deeply, maybe tapping into something already there with this new international crowd. It implies their core identity, born back in the Valley, had this kind of universal appeal, or maybe it had a global need for community and connection around cannabis culture. This wasn't just a local success story moving overseas. It was like a powerful confirmation of the brand's relevance on a whole global stage. That explosion, it could be down to a mix of things. Their existing brand strength, maybe good social media, and possibly just a real hunger for authentic, community-focused cannabis spots in a place like Barcelona. It really shows how a strong, authentic brand, when you relaunch it smartly after learning hard lessons, can truly cross borders.
And that brings us pretty much up to today. August 23rd, 2025. That marks a huge milestone. 3 years of Kush House in Barcelona, 3 years of, as the source says, community culture and cannabis by the beach. What a journey, huh? From a dispensary backroom to this thriving international lounge.
Incredible.
It really does circle back to that powerful statement from the source. More than music, more than cannabis, it's a movement. What kicked off as this local record label focused on a very specific scene, it's evolved into something much bigger, much broader. It's now, proof of resilience, culture, and vision, just like the source says. That original mission, giving voice to that hip-hop cannabis lifestyle, it didn't just survive, it transformed. It went from local art to an international cultural hub. It proves that an authentic brand, built strong, capable of learning from its knocks, can genuinely create a lasting global movement that grows beyond its roots.
Wow. Yeah, what an inspiring story from that tiny dispensary back room in the Valley, fueled by garage-level ambition and that unique mix of hip-hop and cannabis, all the way to this buzzing beachside cultural spot in Barcelona.
Yeah.
That dream from 2008. It really is alive, thriving, and only growing stronger. It's just a massive testament to holding on to a vision, having the sheer grit to push through, and the wisdom to learn from every single stumble.
Exactly. The Kush House story, it's packed with lessons on perseverance, smart adaptation, and sticking to your core identity, even when you're dealing with huge changes and really deep personal hardship. And it makes you wonder, and this is something for you, the listener, to chew on, what specific things do you think were the absolute game changers for their growth? What allowed them to take that movement from one very specific place and make it resonate somewhere completely different internationally? And thinking bigger picture, what does the story suggest about building brands and expanding culture in the world we live in now, which is so connected?
Definitely something to think about. How that vision, that determination, and crucially the ability to learn from setbacks and adapt smartly can really turn a local dream into something huge, something international. A powerful lesson for anyone trying to build something meaningful, something that lasts. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.